Hello everyone, welcome to another webinar from MDB Live series. It's David from MD Bootstrap. As always, let's us wait a couple of seconds because we are streaming to two platforms, to YouTube and to the Facebook group, to the Facebook. So I see people connecting right now. Hello everyone, hello Alan, hello Dejan. Nice to see you again, guys. So, just to quickly remind you, as always, you can already download the lesson files which I prepared for you here. And if you haven't joined our Facebook group, you can also do that so that you will find always new information. Hello Hiram. Hi guys, let me know where are you from. Hey Vladimir again, hello from Delft, Netherlands. Okay guys, so basically today we're gonna learn about Ajax. So some of you may know already what Ajax is for and come here for to learn how to use it. Some of you may don't know what actually it is, but no worry, we're gonna explain that all today during this webinar. Yep, this video is recorded and it's always available for replay on our YouTube channel. So if you want to watch it again and if you want to watch the previous webinars, just go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, and there we are uploading on a weekly basis new tutorials for you. Okay guys, so far I think that most of the people has joined. Okay, now actually they are still joining. Cool. A lot of reactions. Thank you guys, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And if you like this tutorial series, just leave a like, just leave a star to our repository. That will help us to reach more people. Okay, let me quickly check. Status check on YouTube. Great. Status on Facebook. Okay, so let's get started. Guys, Ajax. Why do we need Ajax? What is Ajax? Why do we, how to use it? This all these questions we're gonna answer today and even more. So as you can see, today we're gonna talk about what Ajax, HTTP, XML, and JSON are. We're gonna check. We're gonna write a code to read files using Ajax. We're gonna read JSONs, and finally we're gonna call the REST APIs from Ajax. And we also get to know about what API is and how to use it. And finally, if we're gonna make it within an hour, because I want to keep it short as always, I want to keep it within an hour, the lesson part, the training part within an hour. If we're gonna have enough time, I'm gonna show you also how to use Ajax in a jQuery. Guys, as always, please remember, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to pose them. Just right away. If they're gonna be related anyhow to the subject we are talking about, I'm gonna answer them directly. And otherwise, if you want to ask questions regarding something else, anything, do not hesitate. But I'm gonna answer them after the lesson part. Okay, guys. So let's start from scratch. Ajax, as I said, this is the main subject of this tutorial. So why is it so important? Basically, I'm not sure if you remember, but well, few years back, basically every single page was working that way, that whenever you switch from some website A to website B, it always had to load itself again, like this, right? Look, I'm browsing now GitHub repository, and every time I click to some file, some folder over here, it has to reload the entire page from scratch. And this is like, this is the, well, let's call it old way. And obviously this is not how we do it right now. This is not how Facebook works, and that's why we want also get to know how to create pages which can work without reload. And this is basically what Ajax is about. So Ajax stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML, and it's not a programming language, it's not a library. So it is, well, while Ajax is not a technology itself, it's often described as a new approach to using number of existing technologies together, including HTML or HTML, JavaScript, DOM, XML, XSLT, XML, HTTP, and so on. So many difficult technologies, but the point is that we are all using them together to make asynchronous call in the background. So basically what Ajax allows us is to read the data from our server in the background, so without reloading the page, which means, and that's what's going to be built today, is that if I'm going to click any button on this page, like this one, let's say, I should be able to see the content of this page, of this folder tutorial, without reloading the page, which obviously is much more convenient and much more useful when it comes to building web applications. Okay, a bit of history for you guys, because that might be a little bit confusing for you. I mean, as I mentioned before, Ajax stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML, but this is the tricky part. I mean, basically, we Ajax contain XML in its name, but basically we're not gonna use XML. What we're gonna use is JSON. And the reason behind it is that first of all, I mean, you can still use XML, but the point is that, before, I mean, long time back, XML was a kind of standard. It still is in a huge corporate and in a big projects. Because both of them, they are meant to store the data. So they are designed to store the data. However, they have some differences, and we're gonna see these differences very soon. Actually, I'm gonna see this on examples. We're not gonna jump into XML often, and the reason behind it is because today you barely use XML when it comes to web and front end and web development itself. Even on the backend side, you don't often use XML, but still XML is an important part of the history of the web development, and this is the reason why it remains in the name. So Ajax as asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Today we should rather say asynchronous JavaScript and JSON, but well, then the abbreviation will be like AJJ or something like that. So that wouldn't be convenient to read. But of course, that's not the reason why they stopped doing this. Okay, so how Ajax actually works for you. So this is a small chart which explains how Ajax works. So as you can see on the left side, this is a common path. So this is the way we basically use a web browser. This is the way we basically use we build our pages. So every time, this is the client, this is us browsing, right? This is our web, this is our web browser. And every time we switch to the new page, it's going to the server. It's sending request. Hey, give me the google.com page, and it's gonna return back the HTML of that page. And as a result, we can see it. But what Ajax allows us to do is that we can call this layer in between using simple JavaScript, and that will not cause a page to reload. So this will handle for us the call to server, and then we can update our web page without without refreshing the page. Okay, before we put our hands on keyboard and start building our first application using Ajax, we need to also get a little bit more familiar with HTTP methods. And of course, I mean, obviously, it's a huge subject and it's very complex. But we're not gonna go into much details. I just want you to understand a core basics. So let's do a small example first. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create a new folder for you. Let's call it Ajax. I'm gonna enter into that folder. I'm gonna open this as always with the Visual Studio Code. Let me know if everything is readable for you, if you can see everything clearly. So I'm gonna just create HTML index.html file, and this is, guys, first tip which I have for you today. So if you're using VSC, which stands for Visual Studio Code, and if you are using Emmet, which is there by default, you can do the small trick which speed ups your development. So if you put the exclamation mark and then press tab, you're gonna have a very basic snippet of your website. So this is something which we are looking for. So I'm gonna say it AX1, and let's create some heading. So again, H1 tab, and it will create text for us. So this is all what Emmet is taking care of. Okay, guys, let's say hello MDB world, and what we've been doing so far was that we've been just double clicking on this page, on this file, and it was opening in a browser. So this is first thing which we have to stop doing from now on, and the reason behind it is that because we have to use a server. We need a server to serve our website, because then we're gonna be sending more requests to it. So as you can see, if we double click on the HTML file, it's gonna open it, and it's gonna use so-called file protocol, right? So it's just opening like any other file, like you're using some PDF reader and you're just using like file open. So this is the same way we did right now. But what we want to have here, we want to start using HTTP, right? So every time you go to any page, you're using HTTP. Underneath there is http.google.com, right? If I copy this one and paste, we have this HTTPS, right? So we also want to start using this here. So how to achieve that? Well, we need a server. So we could use some advanced server, like there is this XAMPP server, which is like nice server which has everything built in. So it's like Apache, it's the MariaDB, so database, PHP and Perl. But we're not gonna do it. We're not gonna use it right now because it's I mean, we don't need that much. What we're gonna do instead is we're gonna install a small plugin into Visual Studio Code. So in order to do that, we need to go to extensions and search for live server. So this is the first one here. I've already installed it. I can uninstall it for you and install it again. So as you can see, it's very simple, it's very quick. And what it gives us, it allows us to open, to set up like a small server, small server on our desktop, on our laptop, and it allows us to run it. And in order to run it, we can do it. We can run it in multiple ways. I want to show you 3 ways of running it. So let me restart Visual Studio Code here. Okay, now it's going. Now it's here, right? So now after restarting, I've got this icon here which says go live. So this is what we're gonna use. The other option is to right click on a file and use open with the live server, and the last option is to click on the file we want to run and also open with live server. I'm gonna click this icon and see what's gonna happen right now. So when I click it, it will automatically give me a notification that server has started and give me the port, and it will use my default browser to open it, open the web page here. So it's using IP address 127.0.0.1, which is a local host. So this is IP of our machine. It's so-called loopback. We're gonna learn more about the loopbacks and IPs in another series regarding networking. And we are using this port, and at the end it's opening this file. And the cool feature for the live server is that every time we update our page, so I'm gonna add some subheading here, and look at that, I'm just gonna save the file. So I'm just gonna click File, Save, and live server, spotted this update and refresh the page automatically. So we don't really have to refresh every single time our page to see to see whether the new code has been applied. It's gonna happen automatically. Okay, but why do we need server? It's because I want to show you these HTTP methods which are used for whenever we are browsing. So let's have a look at this example, guys. If we open our page if we want to open developer tools, and we're gonna switch to network tab over here, and now I'm gonna refresh the page. Look what's gonna happen. I'm gonna get here a bunch of files over here, and the reason behind it is that because I'm using Chrome and I have a lot of extensions loaded over here. So I don't want these files to happen. I don't want to remove all my extensions. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna open incognito mode, and I'm gonna do the same trick. So in the incognito mode, I open the developer tools, and I'm gonna open our website here, and look what's gonna happen. So we have this index.html file, and this is so-called, and this index is being given us by HTTP GET method. So there are multiple HTTP methods like get, post, put, head, delete, patch, options, and so on. Don't worry about that. We're gonna learn about it in the future. But for now, we will be mostly focusing on a get. So basically get, as the name stands for, is to get some resource from web. So look what's happening here. A web browser is sending this request. So this is the request. Look at this one. So this is the request which is being sent by our browser underneath. So it has some metadata over here. We don't have to worry about it, but it's showing which host is sending what we want to get. So it's saying that we want to have this index.html file. This is the server which we are calling, and some more data over here. It's also introducing itself, saying which web browser we are using, language, and so on and so on. And in a response, we are receiving this HTML code, right? So this is the code. This is code of our web page. Look at this one. This is a code injected by live server, so we can ignore it. But basically, this is the HTML which we are parsing, and this is important for you because we have to realize that almost everything in a web development is using this HTTP protocol. Not everything. Not literally everything, there are other protocols, but when it comes to web browsing, it's usually that. And look at this example. I'm gonna load some CSS file over here. So I'm just loading some CSS from CDN, and look what's gonna happen here. I'm having two GET requests, right? So one is for HTML, and the other one is loading as the CSS file. And look at that, we have this status 200 means okay. And what's gonna happen if I'm gonna do some typo? Let me provide some address which doesn't exist, right? I'm gonna save it. And boom, what we have here, I have 404. So we all know this error, not found, right? This means that we sent a GET request, but server replied 404, which means I couldn't find the file for you. And there are plenty of these errors and status code, and we're gonna learn about them in future. For now, what you have to understand and know that 200 means okay, and 404 means not okay. And just to be, just to that you are not get surprised, look at that. I refreshed the page and I got the status 304. What does it mean? Status 304 stands for not modified. Why is it so? It's because web browsers are smart, and it doesn't make sense to make a call every single time when we open the same page. So what's happening here? Web browser is checking whether this page has changed somehow. So it's asking server whether it's changed or not, and if this didn't change, it will serve you the cached version. So the cached version is the version of the website which is already in your browser. It's on your hard drive, and that's why loading will be much faster, right? Even you can also apply caching also for a certain part of your website. Like just for the images. So for example, the text paragraphs can change, but the pictures may remain the same, and you may ask browser to cache it, because it doesn't make sense to load this picture and to download all the pictures again and again and again. Okay, guys, let me know if this HTTP methods is clear for you. Are they clear, and do you have this good understanding of how it's worked, that we are sending this call to server and it's replying? And I'm gonna slowly move on, because now it's time to build our first piece of code with use of Ajax. Okay, guys, so we have this Ajax. I'm gonna call it, let's say, Ajax file. So what we are about to do right now is we want to load a file from our hard drive using Ajax, which means without refreshing the page. So I'm gonna add some button over here with some ID, so we could use it later for JavaScript. And let's say get text file content. And I'm gonna also create some div over here, which gonna be our placeholder for the content of the file, which we are about to load. There is a question from Mark. Yes, but can you explain quickly how you set up your page as it is now? And I'm not sure, what do you mean by setup pages? Do you mean by window or by, if the question is about Windows, then on the Windows it just press Windows key and press left key, arrow, and right top you can use different arrows. And if I didn't get your question, please rephrase it, Mark, so I can answer it. Okay, guys, so we have a button here, and obviously nothing happens here. Div is empty, so we can't see it. So first thing we have to do, is to define something which is called let xhr equals new XML HTTP. Whoops, I use style, sorry, my bad. Of course, I meant to use script. No, command script. Okay, let xhr equals to new XML HTTP request. Mark, yes, with the lower part of the Chrome. Here you can change the doc site. If you click on those three dots over here, you can choose whether you want to have it in the bottom, left, right, or you can even de-attach it to a separate window. So this is where you set it up. Okay, guys, so what it is, actually let's check what it is. So I'm gonna say console log xhr and let's refresh page. Whoops. Okay, now it's here. Oh, it was waiting for MDB CSS. So let's remove this part. So again, so as you can see, this is an object. So as you can see, this is an object. This is an object which has some functions predefined, and we're gonna use these functions to do an Ajax call. So this is the first step to do an Ajax call in a pure JavaScript. Now, so let me also add some comment here. Say it's create XHR object. By the way, as you can see, we also have here this XML HTTP request, which is, you know, kind of obsolete nowadays. You can still use this with XML, but the point is that when it comes to web development, XML is not that often used, because JSON is much faster, much lighter. So you barely use XML nowadays. Okay, now the next step we have to do is we're gonna use an open function. So this function accepts 3 parameters. So let's say it open, and we're gonna have 3 parameters. First is a call type. Second one is an URL or file location, and the last one is sync or async, or actually true or false, which means sync or asynchronous call. So guys, what does it mean, synchronous or asynchronous call? And a good example for that one was this one. Where is it? So if I had this here, so I have some file which doesn't exist, and I refresh the page, look what's going on here. So see, it's so-called blocking call. So I'm gonna refresh the page again, and look what's gonna happen. So I'm expecting to see this console log over here, but instead there is nothing going on, and boom, then I have first the error, and then I've got my console log. The reason behind it is this, because this call is synchronous, which means when this call is happening, everything is blocked until I got the response. So usually, in many cases, I would say most often you would rather use asynchronous call, and this asynchronous calls means that send a request, you know, release the release thread, release the thread so the rest of the website could work, and when it got the response, just, you know, work on that. And usually you want to do it that way, but not always. I mean, imagine, for example, there are some specific cases, like, you know, if you are working in banking area and you are issuing a new transfer, like a wire transfer, you don't want to do it asynchronous, right? Because, you know, if you imagine that you are doing asynchronous money transfer. So you clicked, you didn't get the response because it was asynchronous, and you were able to click again, right? So if something goes wrong with your request, you may click like 3 or 5 times. And if they're all asynchronous, you may end up sending 5 transfer instead of 1. So there are cases where you want to specifically use synchronous call, and the wire transfer is one of these, because you want to click and you want to block everything and wait until you got the response, whether the transfer was okay or not. But here, in this case, we don't want to wait. We assume that these data are not that important, and we don't want to block other scripts from execution. So that's why we're gonna use our function in that way. XHR open. So the first one is get. So we are specifying our HTTP method, and we're gonna use get. As I said before, you could use post, you could use delete, but there are more than only 3 I mentioned, but we're not gonna use them today. We're gonna focus only get method. Now I'm gonna specify a file, a path to our file. So I'm gonna use lorem.txt file, which of course doesn't exist yet. And finally, I'm gonna say true, which means I wanna use I want to use asynchronous call. So let's save it, let's refresh it, and let's save it, refresh it, and as you can see, nothing really happens yet, but we will get there. So what I'm gonna quickly do now, I'm gonna do lorem. Oops, I need to get here. Tab, so it will generate some text for me, and I'm gonna create a new file and save it as a lorem.txt, so the file which we are trying to open over here. Okay, guys, now, so now let's tie it up in some function call. So what we want to do is we want to do add event listener. So every time we click on our button, we want to listen for a click. This is something we learned a few webinars back, and we're gonna call function, let's say load file. Oops, load file. Okay, and let's wrap it up in a function. And let's see if this works. So let's remove this console log. So nothing really happened, and the reason behind it is because we need last function. So what we have to do, we have to actually send our request. So we're gonna say xhr send, and now let's try to send it. Okay, so again, no result, but let's check our network tab and see what's going on here. Every time I click it, it's doing a new call. As you can see, here you can filter different type of calls. So you can have all of them. You could have like, you know, JavaScript calls, CSS. So when we were loading CSS, if I could click here, I would see only this CSS file being loaded here. And XHR fetches are available here when we click on XHR, or if we use all. So again, let me refresh it for you. There is nothing here. Once we click, it's loading our file. So I think, I believe this is a good starting point. So we already loaded file. Now we have to do something with it. But before we learn how to do something with this, let me quickly give you some input, so you would have better understanding how this XHR works. Before we start handling the response, you have to know that there are some pre-steps during making the call. So each call we are making is going through all these steps. So this, like the state number 0 is request is not initialized. Then when we send it, first it's connecting to a server, and then it's switching status to 1. Then we have the next step is request received, then processing request, and finally request finished and response is ready. Why is it so important? Because it's important for you to understand, because in the past, what we had to do was to basically to check on which state our call actually was, and only when it reached the state number 4, we were capable to do something with this request. Of course, obviously, we are loading a very small file over here, so everything is going very quickly. So it's almost immediately becomes number 4. But sometimes, you know, when you call some external server, it may and it will definitely take more time. So this process will go through. And sometimes you want, for example, to sometimes you want to verify whether you are still processing or not, because like the very simple example is to show some loading GIF, right? So when you load, you want to show some animation over here that user know, so that user know that it's still loading. Okay, but luckily we don't have to do it, all of that. We can do it, and that's gonna be in more advanced tutorial. But for now, the good news is that what we can do is we can use xhr onload function. So what we're gonna do, say xhr onload equals to function, and we're gonna write this function here, and let's do a console log this. So this is this response, and let's see what's gonna happen now. Boom. So every time we click, we are getting this message to our console log. Now, as you know already, the fact that we made a call and the call was somehow successful doesn't necessarily mean that we got what we wanted to get. So for example, you've seen before that we were getting this like 404 error, which means that you could say that wasn't successful, but from technical point of view, from a server point of view, it was a correct request, right? So we sent a request, we wanted to get something, server didn't find it, but it replied to us, sorry, I can't find this file. So technically this communication was successful and we got the proper feedback. So this is very important, because then what we have to do, we have to take care about making sure that we got what we wanted on our side. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna do something like this. This status equals to 200, and then console log this response, else console log error. Okay, so let's try this one. It works fine, and I'm gonna change this name of the file now to something which doesn't exist. And we got error, right? So you could be technically as specific as you want. So I prepared some more specific function here, right? So look at this. We could, for example, provide a very specific response, right? So since we know that status 404 means file not found, we can inform user that he didn't find, or we didn't find, the file he was looking for. If the status would be 403, it means that we were forbidden to get this asset which we are looking for. And actually, accidentally, I spoiled the next part of our tutorial, but you can already see that the next step to handle our response is just to handle it using JavaScript and just to assign this to our div, which we have over here. Okay, guys. So let me quick this one. So this is about the doing Ajax for files. There is a question from Naeem on YouTube. What happens if we reload? 200 changes, right? As you can see, it doesn't change. In case of files, it doesn't change to 3, or so it's not caching it. And actually you are right. We could configure our server in the way that would also cache files, right? So now actually there is no point in downloading this again, but since we are not caching this file, we always get to 200, not 304. But if that was the case, then we should probably do something like if this status equals to 200, or this status equals to 304, because both are correct in our case, right? So very good question from you, Nay. Okay, guys. So just one more thing I want to show you is that, as I mentioned before, there are these statuses, and you could check them, but instead of them, you can use predefined functions. So you could use, for example, something like that. So this is so we have functions for on error, And now important thing is that you need to distinguish, because this error is different than that error. So this is not error to the browser. This is the successful call with the different status code. And we may not like the status code, but this is not an error. Error will probably, error would be here if we were trying to, for example, access website from a different domain, and we would get some, you know, some so-called course error. So let's see. I'm not sure if that's gonna work. I'm gonna try to simulate it. Right. So you can see now, right? Right here, an access from origin has been blocked by course. So this is an error because we were not even able to set up a connection to this server, because this server is blocking it, and it's blocking all the requests from different domain. And the reason behind it is, of course, security. They don't want allow other people to call them, other bots, and so on and so on. Yeah, so that's the reason. So this is to handle this kind of errors. And on progress, imagine that this file, and by the way, I prepared for you a file like this over here. If you go to the final, you're gonna find the lorem 65k, which has 65,000 paragraphs, and you can try to load it by yourself, and you can try to, then you're gonna see this on progress. So this on progress should show you loading data until it's loading, and then it will replace with the data. Okay, guys, so this is mostly about using Ajax to load a plain text, a plain files. But let's move on to something more interesting. So let's learn a little bit more about JSON. So you might seen already JSON during our JavaScript tutorial, but JSON itself is such an important subject that we have another tutorial fully dedicated to JSON. So I'm not gonna go much into into details here, but just to recap on that, and for those of you guys who isn't familiar with JSON yet, just quick recap on what JSON is and how to use it. So as we meant before, JSON is meant for, you know, carrying data, so for transferring data. So we use JSON to describe our data, and we can use different you know, data types within JSON. So for example, we can use strings like hello world, right? So this is a string according to JSON. And also one important thing, very important thing, and the reason why JSON became so popular, actually, you know, we should actually start with you know, with the name itself, as JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So this is like, you know, natural part of JavaScript. So this is part of JavaScript. So technically, every valid JSON is also valid JavaScript, and this is why it becomes so popular. And now almost every language have some JSON parser, and as a result, it's so widely used. Okay, guys. So strings, obviously, we can use numbers, like, you know, like in JavaScript. We can use booleans. We can use arrays with numbers or arrays with strings. We can use objects. So for example, using some key value pairs, right? So we have like key and a value, and we can have for example, objects like name, David, and we can have also for numbers, so like age 30. Okay, So let's create some JSON file, some sample JSON file. So in order to do that, and actually what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna start with, I'm gonna save it as and call it as a person.json file. And now Visual Studio Code will immediately know that I'm writing JSON. It will go and give me a nice color syntax. And also the syntax check. So in case I made some error, it's gonna correct me. So let's create person called with some name. Let's use my example. So my name is David, and let's say we're gonna add some favorite color. And my favorite color is blue. And I made it. Now it's American English versus British English. Okay. Then we can also use Boolean. So we can say this is true. And by the way, as you can see, using Boolean doesn't require to use quotations. What else? Let's define some table, some array over here. So let's say I know JavaScript, a little bit of Python, and quite good at Java. And then what we can also do, we can also nest. And this is very powerful actually, because we can nest objects one under the other. So let's say I have some friends, and let's this friends be an object. So my friend could be he also have a name, Peter. I see that Peter Snapper is watching us. So cheers, Peter. And what else? What else do we have here? He also can have some favorite color. Let's say it's green. And is programmer, let it be false. And finally, he also may have some friends. And let's put some empty array here for now. Okay, guys. So as you can see, this is a valid JSON file. We already have this. Syntax here, and we also have, if we made some error, it will show us here, right? So it's very, very useful. There is suggestion to use some number, of course. Let's say age is gonna be 30. So if we miss some comma, if we add too much comma at the very end, it will just let us know. So it's very, 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 very useful. And why is it so important? So as I mentioned, since valid JSON is also a valid JavaScript, we can directly use this code in our JavaScript file. So let's do it like this. Let person equals to, and now let's paste it. Let's paste it here and let's console log it. And see what's gonna happen now. Yeah, there is a typo here. You're right, guys. You are perfectly right. Let me fix it. And look what's gonna happen now here. I mean, browsers, they have by default built in a JSON parser. So we look at that. We can easily browse through all these objects, which is very, very, very handy, right? I mean, you can easily, even if this structure is more complex like this one, and we have this nested objects over here, we can easily go through this one. And of course, what we're gonna see is that we can also easily access to this data. But as I said before, this is the part of the JSON, and we're gonna learn about it more in the JSON in a JSON tutorial. But for now, it's good for you to understand the basics of JSON and how it works. So for the sake of this tutorial, I create some JSON file with more entries. So let me save it as users JSON. So let's assume those are our users. So those are the users of our application. These are the users of our app, of our website, and we have some name and surname over here. It's email, gender, and IP address, which was used to connect. Okay, so what we're gonna do now, we're gonna try to load this JSON into our app. So let's get back to our code over here, and what we have to do is, of course, we have to change the source of the file. So we're gonna say users.json, and let me get rid of these checks here. I'm gonna leave just 2 remaining. So just this one, I'm gonna get rid of this. So you can see clearly. If this, okay, here is the missing parentheses, square bracket, and yeah, and let's console log this for a moment. So I'm gonna this response, and let's try to load this into memory. Of course, to be precise, we also have to change get JSON content, and let's try to load it. Oops, we got unknown error. Let's see what's going on here. Okay. Okay. Yeah, now it works. Okay, guys. So this is the content which we just loaded from our JSON file. So as you can see, it looks like a JSON, but it doesn't behave like a JSON. So what we have to do is we have to parse it. So how we can do it, as I mentioned to you guys before, most of the languages, most of the programming languages, they have this parser built-in, which makes obviously using JSON much easier, and the same applies to JavaScript obviously. So we're gonna say let data equals to JSON.parse, and we're gonna use this response. And we're gonna console log, but the data this time we should be able to see parsed JSON. And as you can see, we can browse through it like it was normal JSON, and we can access it as well in our JavaScript, like we've been accessing any other object within JavaScript. Okay, so last but not the least, as far as JSON loading is concerned, let's try to render some HTML using in order to load it in some nice, prettier way to our website. So I'm gonna create a new function now, and let's call it render HTML, and we're gonna use some data over here. So we will receive some data, and let's do it that way. So I'm gonna define inner, or I call it HTML string. Let HTML string, which is empty string, obviously. There is a question There are two questions. Wasn't not easier to start a server from Node.js and split the index file in the front and backend? I'm not sure whether it was easier. That's the way, and probably the better way. But for the sake of this tutorial, and assuming that that people have different knowledge, I'm trying to keep it all together without jumping into files, just to make sure that everyone understands where does it come from. And it just, I hope that it's still clear for you guys that this is the JavaScript part and this is the HTML part, and there's not that many front-end parts. So, so that I don't think that this really makes much sense to split it. But obviously, usually this is a good practice to split front-end as well as back-end. Question from Vladimir. Hi, is there an option to load those user JSON with the delay on purpose with the message, of course, like for 2 seconds loading, and then load the users? There is, and I'm gonna since this question was posted, guys, this question to you. If you have any idea, please post the answer. If not, I'm gonna give you the answer after the learning part. Okay, guys, let's go quickly through this one because we have one more interesting part, which will be calling Ajax with Ajax some real API to get the response from the real server. So what we have to do, we have to iterate through our JSON, and we could do it smarter way, but for now I'm gonna show you the very basic way, so you know the basics. Because there are for each loops available and so on, which makes use of and iterating through different objects much easier. But for now, let's do it old-fashioned way. So I'm gonna just use the for loop with I equals to 0, then I smaller than data length, and we want our I to increase with every single loop. And what we're gonna do here is that I'm gonna say that I wanna add to my HTML. Actually, you know what? Let's make this HTML an order list item, and let's add new list item, and let's say that we have plus data user number I, and what we have here is first name, I guess. I'm not sure, I'm gonna check it, plus space plus data I last name plus, let's say, gender is plus data gender plus last connection from IP and data IP address, if I'm not mistaken. Let's now check users IP address. Okay, let's see if that's gonna work. And at the end, what I want to do, and we also need to close at the end our li item. And at the end, I want to close also this one. So HTML plus equals closing OL tag. And finally, let's set it to HTML string. Okay, let me word wrap this for you. So hope you can see it, and let's try to run it. Oh, okay. Of course, obviously we have created a function, but we also have to call it. So now instead of do console log, we're gonna render our HTML data. And actually, instead of inner text, we should say inner HTML, and boom. Right, so we just parsed our JSON file, which we called using Ajax, and we rendered some HTML. So as you can see, we obviously, without reloading, loaded some content to our page. And now I hope you can imagine that you can, of course, parameterize your request, which means you can, depending on your input here, so you can have some form over here. Actually, you know what? Let's move to the next step, which is step number 3, which is calling a real API. And let me use this as an example. So what I'm gonna do, guys, we're gonna use this API from Open Weather app. So this is API which is available for us. I mean, it's free. You can do some limited number of calls here. And there are different APIs available for us. Okay, so let me quickly explain to you guys who doesn't know what API actually is. So API stands for like Application Programming Interface, and basically it's something that allows, you know, one piece of software talk to another piece of software. So in our case, it allows our web page to talk to the weather server and to talk to each other. So there are many kind of APIs, but you know, one which which you're gonna deal mostly with is an REST API, where REST stands for representational state transfer. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it's not important at the moment. Just for you to know this name, REST, but we don't have to bother with it right now. And I like to think about API, using API as like, you know, ships going to different harbor or different docks, right? So we have our harbor, which is the server. In our case, it's gonna be like this server. We have our ships, and the ships are requests, right? So we are sending some requests, we are sending some ship, and this request is carrying some data. So usually when we are doing GET request, we carry very little data, like just the information what we want to get from our harbor, and then in return we can have a lot of data from harbor. But on the other hand, this is not always the case. It can be other ways, right? So for example, if we're gonna use like a delete method, so what we're gonna say, we're gonna send like a huge load saying, hey, please remove all these users from database, and the answer from database or from API will be just, okay, I just deleted. So we send a lot of data and we receive a very little back. And sometimes it just works, you know, in both directions. So we can send a lot of data and receive a lot of data as well. And also very important part of this is comparison are docks. I mean, docks as a, you know, different docks in a harbor, because those are like endpoints. And here we have these different endpoints. Look at this one. So if we want to get the current weather data, we're gonna call this endpoint. The API open weather org data 2.5. But if we want to use something else, we're gonna use this forecast, right? So this endpoint here says to which dock exactly we want to send our ship. And if we're gonna send our request which is valid for this one to wrong endpoint, it's not gonna work like it works with the normal harbor and normal ships. So guys, in order to use this one, what you have to do, you have to create an account. And once you log into your account, let me quickly do this. You're gonna have this API key here, right? And well, you don't want to share this API key with anyone. I'm sharing this for the sake of this tutorial, but then after the tutorial, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna generate the new API key, and I'm gonna remove this one. and usually you don't want to share your API keys, right? Because this API key is used for this, server to count how many requests you did, and very often in case of different APIs you might want or need to pay for every single usage. So this is something you should keep secret. But we're gonna use the free version here. The free version has a limit of 60 requests per minute for a weather. Okay, so now just quickly how to use an API. So let's use this current weather data. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna get this key from here, and we're gonna replace our endpoint over here to point it to HTTP API and so on. And as you can see, this call has some parameters over here, right? And those are get parameters. So every time we are doing some call with a get parameter, with get, we can pass some parameters. Let me quickly show you some example. I'm just gonna open some some advertisement from here, and look what's happening here. I hope we're gonna see it. View word wrap. So look at this URL. So until here we have like a URL, so we could just basically get rid of this one and it will still work. And what we have here are parameters. So after the question mark you have your first parameter, which is type value 3, and then you have sign, and you have another parameter and some value which Facebook uses to track whatever we are doing. And yeah, and this call has two parameters, right? So one is type and second is EID. And this exactly the same applies over here. So we have our call here, question mark. We have our first parameter Q for city, and we're gonna put here like London, for example. And we have to put our API ID, which is our API key, over here. So let me grab my API from here key and let me use this one. Let me paste it here. And what we want to do here, we just want to, for now, we want to just show this data. And let's see if this works for us. Yeah, it looks like it's working. Nice. So this is the JSON response from weather API. So it gives us the weather for London, and in the main units you can see the temperature is 284, and if you go to docs, you're gonna see that the weather by default is in let me check this. So default units are Kelvin, and if you want to use Celsius, then we have to add another parameter, and usually you find all this information in the API description how to use it. So let me check. Yeah, so here is the parameter. So we need to add another parameter, unit metrics. So let us add this extra parameter to our call. So I'm gonna add it at the end. So again, sign, another key value pair, save it, and now we have this metric here, and it says 11 degrees. So guys, basically what happens here is you not necessarily always have to use this key, but for all the public APIs, it's usually the case. I mean, they usually require you to register and provide API keys, and the reason behind it is very simple, right? I mean, if you're not gonna do it, there are so many spam bots. There are so many bots over there, which there are so many bots over there which are just calling and trying to spoil your servers. So in the past it was easy to let's go to Facebook slash YouTube. And we are getting this YouTube page over here, and this YouTube page has some data like number of likes and so on. And in the past, it was very easy. I could just change this www to graph.facebook, and I would get all this data over here. So like, you know, the Facebook page name, number of likes and so on as a JSON. But for now, as you can see, you need to have an access token to request. So if you are building your own API, and we're gonna build our own API in the next webinars, we not necessarily need this, but if you wanna send your API or expose it to a public, then you're probably gonna need this kind of API verification. So when this call is received by server, it's checking whether my key is actually valid. Okay guys, so that's mostly it for API. Yeah, I mean, obviously we could, for example, what we could do here is that we could provide some inputs over here, and we could, for example, create a drop down with the list of cities like, you know, London, New York, and so on and so on. Get this value from input from drop down and update it here, right? So we could just create our let endpoint equals to something like that. Let city equals to whatever. Let it be like London. And what we could do, we could dynamically create this endpoint here. So the endpoint could be like this plus city equals, not city, it's q equals plus city, right? And this will that's gonna dynamically create another endpoint for us, so we could just dynamically change call to the API, right? And this is what really gives a huge value to your website, because you can dynamically change the input to your request, and based on that you can get different response. Okay guys, and finally, last but not the least, is I wanted to show you how to use, because you know how to use this with the plain JavaScript, and as always, as I mentioned, it is important for you guys to understand how does it work in the plain JavaScript before you start using some libraries. But just for you, just for your knowledge, just to see how different it is, how easier that would be using JavaScript, let's quickly using jQuery. Let's quickly do it in a jQuery. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna remove all this here. We're not gonna use this render function anymore. I'm just gonna do a quick call, just a call. So as you know, we always start with something like this. So this is document ready, and we want to set the listener on button, which we have here. And we want to create this function, make call, and this function looks like this. So how to make an Ajax call in jQuery? We do the $, we say Ajax, and what we are specifying just a few parameters. First is type, so pretty much similar what we've been doing before. Second is our URL. It's URL, or actually we don't need this one, my bad. URL, and I lost this one, so let me copy it. And we have predefined success function, where we will call response. So this is the response we're gonna get from server, and we also have the same for error, so we can just create function for error. Let's see if that works. yeah, so as you can see, it's working fine, it's working perfectly, same way. And as you can see, this is also easier. And when it comes to more, when it comes to more difficult queries, more challenging queries, it's also just easier to use Ajax because you don't need to change all the statuses and so on. But then again, guys, keep in mind that you should always try to have the best understanding on what's going on behind the scene, because when something doesn't work, it's gonna be much easier for you guys to understand it. Okay, so that's mostly it. We almost made it in an hour, so I'm glad it went so smoothly. Do you have any question, guys? I know there were some questions. I'm gonna go through all of them in a second. Just to remind you, you can get the lesson files with all the tutorial itself and the final files. So you can have it's here, webinars, Ajax, so final. So these are all the files we've been creating today, different use cases you can use. So this is our Facebook group, which you can join if you want. We are posting a lot of materials over there, a lot of discussions, a lot of quizzes, a lot of questions, technical. Here you can subscribe for our future webinars, and we're gonna have a lot of them. It's a long way for us. I think the next one's gonna be about forms. So we're gonna create some forms and we're gonna try to work on them, doing some validation and also connect to some Ajax. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you have any questions. And I'm gonna answer now the question which was posted before, and it was from Vladimir. So, hi, is there any option to load those users JSON with the delay on purpose, with the message, of course, like for 2 seconds loading and then load the users? I mean, it sounds like something pretty naughty to postpone it, but I'm gonna treat it as a technical question and I'm gonna answer it. So yeah, there is this option. There is this option in JavaScript. So what you can do here is you can basically set timeout on any function. 21, where is it? The function, my function. Oops. So as you can see, after refreshing the page, it will wait for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3, and then it will run this function here. So you can delay on purpose some on your function. So you can create delay on purpose. Okay, Alan, thanks man, gotta go. Nice explanation of Ajax and JSON. Mark, thank you. I had no idea how Ajax worked. API, so it helps a lot. Okay, guys, if you have any questions, I'm gonna stay here to answer them. If something wasn't clear, just let me know. And if not, we're gonna see each other next week, same time, same place. And let me quickly check. I think we're gonna have this one on forms, right? Yeah, forms. So validation, configuration, usage, and more. So we're gonna try to fill the form, handle the form, and try to send data from a contact form to our email, for example, or in the future also to use some data to the API. Okay, guys, I don't see more questions. I'm glad to see that. I hope that this is because everything was clear to you. Thanks again for having you today. Thanks for your time. I hope you enjoyed it, and please remember, do not get into this tutorial trap. Do not get into this webinars trap. I mean, it's not about watching tutorials. It's not about watching webinars. It's about coding. I mean, what makes you a real coder? It's coding. What makes you a real programmer is programming. So just please, guys, download it. Download the files and try to go through it. Just try to type everything by yourself. Just make those mistakes. Just lose these commas. Just lose these semicolons, and that's how you're gonna learn how to use it, because this is what makes you a real programmer. And this trap is very common, that you kind of feel that, oh, I really do understand what this guy was talking about. I got the concept. I already know it. But when it comes to real writing application, then is when you're gonna hit the wall, and when you're gonna have some difficulties. So just don't waste this opportunity and try to solve that beforehand. Okay, some questions. Great. Different questions. In regards to MDB, you use a lot of functions that you call and you know them all off on top of your head. I have noticed MDB has a lot of functions too, but have not been able to find fast listing of them. It's not found MDB toggle button. MDB toggle button via Google, not one left side of MDB page. Is there a shortcut? Okay, it's a good feedback to us. To be honest, I didn't know that this is not. I didn't know this is not there. But I'm gonna make a note of it. But mostly, I mean, usually you can always find this information over here on our webpage. So there, where you have this sample, this samples. But we're gonna think of using creating some separate webpage just to collect all the data. And for example, when it comes to different technologies, because MDB is available also for Angular, React, Vue, you usually have these options here. So let's check, for example, tables, and usually you have this API over here, and then you have all the props and options, and you can clearly see what does it stand for. In jQuery it's slightly different, but I'm just gonna make a note of it, and we're gonna try to figure it out. And if you are just missing something, feel free always to either post on the group or just post on our support page, which will create a ticket for you, and you can always ask this question and you will get answer from MDB team. TJ, thanks as always for the true and easy understand explanation. Vladimir, if you're using RStudio as a backend, then using Ajax is not possible. I'm not sure what its RStudio is. I'm not sure if you're referring to R language. Let me check. Let me check what RStudio is. RStudio is interpreted implementation for R. Yeah, okay. R REST API. So yeah, I think you can look at this. An introduction to access RESTful APIs using R. So there are several R packages will wrap API calls. I mean, at the end is HTTP call, right? Is this protocol, and Ajax is just wrapping around it just to make it easier for us. But technically, I'm pretty sure that you can do it. So if you just search for R REST API, you should find a lot of. You will actually find a lot of materials like this. See how to access any RESTful API, an introduction to accessing. Oh, it's actually for. Let me check whether you were. So as long as you have this REST API exposed, you can use Ajax. I'm not sure also which direction you are talking about. Do you want to make call from R or not, or to R? But technically, as long as you are using RESTful APIs, you should be able to do it. Okay guys, I don't see more question popping up, so thanks again for watching. As always, pleasure to have you. It's always pleasure to have discussion with you. It's always pleasure to answer your questions. So see you next week, the same time and the same place, and yeah, stay safe in this corona time, and see you soon. Hey, take care.